What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Wrestling Decoded, and today we're starting somewhere most fans never actually think about. WWE has an official creative writing department, over 20 professional writers working out of a dedicated floor at company headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. Triple H himself confirmed this directly in a 2015 interview, describing writers who came from soap operas, late-night television, movies, and theater, all working together to shape what eventually reaches your television screen every single week. So here's the real question this raises. If every word and every storyline genuinely comes from a script written by professionals in an office building hundreds of miles from any arena, what happens in the moments that don't fit neatly into that process? Today we're going through WWE's biggest hidden facts and building the whole thing around exactly that tension between what's written down on a page and what actually happens once the cameras start rolling and real people are involved. Let's get into it. If you're into these deep dives into the real business behind the entertainment, that's exactly what this channel does. Go ahead and subscribe before we start. Let's start with the script itself, because understanding how deliberate this process actually is changes how you read everything else on this list. According to Triple H, WWE's creative department blends former wrestlers who understand in-ring psychology with professional writers who've never set foot in a locker room in their entire lives, pairing people who know relationship storytelling with others who know how to translate that story physically back into the ring in a way that actually works as a wrestling match. It's a genuinely sophisticated writing operation, closer to a television drama's writer's room than most fans probably picture when they imagine wrestling getting booked on the fly. Every promo, every turn, every rivalry theoretically starts as words on a page from this exact team, refined and rewritten repeatedly before a performer ever says a line on camera. But here's where things get interesting, because even inside a fully scripted show, real unscripted business decisions still shape what actually reaches the screen in ways the writer's room doesn't fully control. Take the merchandise angle. Chris Jericho has told a story about his then-girlfriend, now wife, buying an action figure of himself and Dean Malenko together, only to find the receipt listed the names Hulk Hogan and Sting instead of the two men she'd actually purchased. The implication is straightforward and, frankly, a little uncomfortable once you sit with it for a moment. Top-tier stars can earn residual payments, even off merchandise sold under other performers' likenesses entirely, meaning the divide between headliners and mid-card talent isn't just about screen time or match placement. It extends directly into the actual money-changing hands behind the scenes, invisible to anyone standing at the merchandise table. That kind of hierarchy shows up again in a story from Gail Kim, one of the most technically gifted women's wrestlers of her entire generation, someone widely respected by peers across multiple promotions for her in-ring ability. Across two separate stints with WWE, spanning years of her career, she never received the sustained push her skill set arguably deserved compared to her contemporaries. In an interview with Jim Ross, she stated plainly that she felt she was never given that push because Vince McMahon simply didn't find her conventionally attractive by the standard the company was pushing for its top women's talent at the time. That's not a storyline decision, not something the writer's room typed up on a script page somewhere. That's a real off-script judgment shaping an actual person's career trajectory for years based on criteria that had nothing to do with her actual wrestling ability. Here's a question worth sitting with. If the show is genuinely scripted top to bottom, with a full professional writing staff behind every storyline, how much of what actually determines a wrestler's real-world success still comes down to decisions that never made it onto any page at all? Dan Severn's story pushes that same tension even further, and it's one of the more striking examples on this entire list. A legitimately accomplished mixed martial artist and amateur wrestler before he ever stepped into a WWE ring, with genuine championship credentials from outside the wrestling world entirely, Severn left the company without much public explanation at the time, and rarely gets mentioned by WWE since his departure. He's since revealed the actual reason himself in interviews. The creative team wanted him to wear 666 inches written on his forehead, positioning him as one of the Undertaker's disciples in an ongoing storyline. For a competitor who'd built his entire reputation on legitimate athletic credibility, someone whose entire value proposition to fans was genuine believability, that gimmick evidently crossed a line he wasn't willing to accept, and he simply walked away rather than perform it on national television. Quick pause here. Drop a comment on which of these secrets genuinely surprised you the most, because I think the merchandise residual story tends to catch even longtime dedicated fans off guard every time it comes up. Now here's a genuinely fascinating piece of speculative history that never actually happened, but reportedly came close to reality. In 1999, around the debut of SmackDown as a new weekly show, there was internal discussion about making the entire program a women-focused product from the ground up. WWE had already seen real commercial value in performers like Chyna and Sable drawing significant attention at the time, proving there was a genuine audience appetite there. Just a year later, both Trish Stratus and Lita would debut and go on to become two of the most important women's performers in company history, helping define an entire era of the women's division. Vince Russo, serving as head writer during this specific period, was known for leaning heavily into gimmick-based, spectacle-driven portrayals of women's wrestling rather than a purely competitive, athletic focus, which fits with the kind of concept a fully women-centered show might have leaned toward under his direction. How close that all-women SmackDown concept actually came to becoming reality isn't fully confirmed one way or another, but the fact that it was seriously discussed at all, right before Stratus and Lita's arrival, fundamentally reshaped the division anyway, says a lot about how differently the entire women's side of the company might have developed if that particular direction had actually been chosen instead. And then there's a detail baked into literally every single match you've ever watched, hiding in plain sight the entire time: referees talking to wrestlers mid-match. Most fans assume this is just standard officiating, enforcing the rules of the match, checking on a downed competitor's condition, the things a referee is technically supposed to do. In reality, referees frequently function as a live communication channel between the backstage production team and the wrestlers actually in the ring, relaying instructions about timing, upcoming spots that need to happen, or how much time remains before a segment needs to wrap up cleanly for the broadcast. It's one of the clearest examples of the show's actual production mechanics operating in full view of a live audience, disguised as something else entirely, right in front of thousands of people who assume they're watching pure sport officiating. Backstage relationships add their own layer to all of this too, proving that not everything unscripted stays contained to business decisions alone. Eric Bischoff and Ric Flair's real tension has been confirmed by multiple wrestlers who witnessed it directly over the years. Bischoff reportedly disliked Flair enough that he genuinely wanted to hurt him, resentful that Flair felt sidelined and disrespected, while performers like Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan received the bigger pushes under Bischoff's leadership. Bischoff would reportedly deliver speeches to the locker room, running Flair down in his absence, shaping how other wrestlers viewed one of the most accomplished performers in the promotion's history. At one especially heated point, he even reportedly threatened to sue Flair for everything he had. This wasn't a storyline rivalry playing out for cameras and building towards some pay-per-view blow-off match. It was genuine animosity between an executive and a performer, happening entirely off script long before the two of them ever crossed paths again as fellow performers years later in a completely different company. So here's the actual through line connecting all of these secrets together. Once you step back and look at the whole picture, WWE genuinely operates as a scripted television product, with a real writer's room, real story architecture, and real professional structure behind almost everything you see on screen. But scripts only ever cover what's actually written down on the page. Everything else, who gets pushed and who gets buried, who walks away rather than wear a number on their forehead, who profits off whose merchandise without the audience ever knowing, what real grudges simmer quietly behind a storyline rivalry that looks purely fictional, happens in the space the script never touches at all. That gap between the official story and the real one underneath it is exactly where most of wrestling's most interesting secrets actually live, hidden in plain sight the entire time. Which of these hidden facts do you think says the most about how WWE actually operates behind the curtain? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want more of these deep dives into the real business behind professional wrestling, make sure you're subscribed to Wrestling Decoded. There's plenty more of this still to uncover.